The inhabitants of Pompeii resided beneath the menacing shadow of a destroyer, yet they regarded it as their generous patron. To them, Vesuvius was not recognized as a volcano. The Latin vocabulary of that period didn't even possess a word to articulate the dormant, fiery power nestled deep within its core. For the Pompeians, it was merely a mountain, a verdant, benevolent colossus that watched over their peace. Vesuvius served as their sustainer. Its fertile volcanic slopes produced the most exquisite grapes in the whole territory. The resulting wine flowed into the ornate cups of the elite and the simple earthenware mugs of the enslaved. Household murals portrayed the mountain as the very seat of Bacchus, a realm where nature flourished triumphantly, never bringing destruction. No one regarded the summit with any trepidation. How could they possibly fear the source of their sustenance? No one remembered that this mountain had erupted with fire 800 years earlier. Human recollection is notoriously brief. Over the course of the time, the very mountain that had sustained them for ages now ravaged the heavens. The sun, once vibrant, diminished into a dim, sickly orb, barely discernible through the oppressive shroud. A pall descended upon Pompeii, not a comforting shade, but the stifling burden of demise. The atmosphere grew thick instantaneously, saturated with sulfurous fumes. In this abrupt descent into obscurity, a grim truth emerged. Their ancient world had met its end, and the deities had ceased to heed their pleas. Envision the instant your accustomed reality begins to unravel. Initially, it appeared almost benign, even mesmerizing. Instead of rain, stones descended from the heavens, white and gray pumice, airy and porous, akin to soiled snow that would never thaw. It pattered on the paving stones and rebounded from shoulders. Astonished, people gazed skyward, brushing warm, weightless shards from their garments. Some even chuckled, attempting to cup them in their hands. Yet, the mirth swiftly dissipated. This snow was searing, abrasive, and, most horrifyingly, ceaseless. The deluge of stones intensified with every passing minute. The sky pelted the city with millions of fragments, transforming a gentle tapping into an incessant, deafening clamor. The terrain steadily ascended at a terrifying pace. 10 centimeters, then 20, then half a meter. Thoroughfares known since childhood vanished beneath the accumulating debris. In this dire situation, their own architecture betrayed the Pompeians. Roman house doors, designed to open outwards, were swiftly sealed by the burgeoning pumice layer. Those who hesitated found themselves interred within their own dwellings, ensnared by a natural trap. Any attempt to force open a door would only result in one outcome, unleashing a torrent of scorching stones into the atrium. Within their homes, a distinct terror unfolded. The graceful roofs of Roman villas, built to withstand rain and wind, were never meant to bear tons of volcanic rock. Beams groaned under the immense critical strain. The splintering of timber and tiles became the grim cadence of the city's destruction. Houses, once havens of solace, transformed into lethal snares. Remaining indoors guaranteed being crushed. Venturing outside meant enduring a barrage of stones in utter blackness. Yet, people emerged. It was an otherworldly exodus. Men, women, and slaves fastened pillows to their heads, shielding themselves with basins or scraps of fabric, a pitiful defense against celestial fury. They struggled through the deep pumice, sinking as if in mire, their feet searing through their sandals. Shouts of "Appia! Marcus! Mother!" were swallowed by the eruption's thunderous din. Lanterns barely pierced the thick, suspended dust, revealing only outstretched hands. Existence contracted to a single step, a solitary breath. All survivors gravitated towards the sea. The harbor appeared to be their sole salvation, a portal to survival. Ships lay anchored there, promising a distant horizon. Yet, Vesuvius sealed off even this escape route. As the battered multitude reached the coastline, a fresh horror confronted them. A fierce headwind relentlessly forced the vessels back into the harbor. No sail could harness any propulsion. The very atmosphere conspired against the fleeing populace. A substantial layer of buoyant pumice now coated the water's surface, transforming the bay into a thick, gray, viscous slurry. Overburdened boats, laden with people, bobbed helplessly in the gloom, utterly immobilized. The hope that had propelled thousands through the devastated city was utterly crushed upon reaching the shore. Retreat was impossible. Pompeii was in its death throes. Advance was impossible. The sea had become an insurmountable barrier. They were stranded on the beach amidst a downpour of incandescent stones, caught between the volcano's wrath and nature's apathy, awaiting the inevitable climax already descending from the mountain's summit. What commenced as a brilliant summer's day devolved into an interminable night. 12 hours of profound darkness, intensified by terror. Time itself seemed to fracture in this place. Each agonizing second of anticipation felt heavier than the stones raining from above. The incessant patter of pumice on rooftops morphed into a monotonous, sanity-eroding drumroll. Millions of lightweight, porous pebbles, innocuous on their own, collectively formed a lethal mass. The ground level relentlessly ascended, 10 centimeters, then half a meter, then a full meter. Doors became jammed from the exterior. Windows vanished beneath the accumulating rubble. Streets, bustling with life just that morning, transformed into canyons choked with gray gravel. The city slowly submerged within this arid ocean, with no hope of rescue. The very air became an adversary, thick, searing, and saturated with sulfur. People ripped off their garments, attempting to breathe through damp fabric, yet their lungs inevitably clogged with cement-like dust. Oil lamps flickered and extinguished, one after another. The flames, much like the inhabitants, were starved of oxygen. In the profound, viscous darkness, where one couldn't even discern their own hand, only sounds persisted. The splintering of collapsing beams, the dull thud of falling stones, and the desperate coughing of thousands facing their doom. Within homes and humble dwellings, personal tragedies unfolded, events we would only bear witness to centuries later. Inside Modestus's bakery, time had literally ceased. 81 loaves of bread remained in the oven, meticulously arranged and ready for a sale that was destined never to occur. The baker likely believed the sturdy walls would safeguard his livelihood, that he merely needed to weather the storm. He was mistaken. The bread carbonized, preserving its shape for 2 millennia, transforming into a dark monument to unfulfilled plans for the morrow. In the house of the Veti, a different kind of drama unfolded, one filled with primal terror. The guard dog, chained near the entrance, fought for its life until its final breath. As the pumice layer rose, the dog scrambled higher and higher, writhing, desperately trying to stay above the shifting current. Yet, the bronze chain proved mercilessly short. The dog perished, arched in a final agony, unable to break the bonds that tethered it to its dying home. Elsewhere, in a corner of a crumbling room, 2 individuals found each other amidst the gloom. Their names are unknown to us, as is their relationship. Such details no longer matter. In a world disintegrating around them, human warmth became the sole remaining reality. They embraced, seeking solace and protection from the inevitable. This gesture served as their ultimate shield. There they remained, 2 souls against the volcano's fury, as ash gradually enveloped them in its eternal shroud. As that endless night yielded to the dull gray morning of August 25th, the survivors, exhausted and partially blinded, allowed themselves a fragile glimmer of hope. The clamor had somewhat subsided. The earth no longer trembled with such ferocity. It seemed the gods had appeased their wrath, but this was a deception. Vesuvius was merely drawing a breath before its final, deadly exhalation. Imagine standing by a window and death overtakes you faster than you can draw a single breath. What transpired in that instant didn't just obliterate the city, it froze time itself. It was nature's cruel stratagem. As the ashfall momentarily lessened, people believed the worst had passed and began emerging from their shelters, dusting off their tunics. Yet precisely at that moment, the column of smoke, which had propped up the sky for nearly a day, lost its potency. Gravity triumphed over pressure. Millions of tons of incandescent rock and gas did not dissipate into the atmosphere, but instead cascaded down the volcano's slopes. Forget the sluggish rivers of lava from which one might escape. This was a pyroclastic flow, a seething avalanche hurtling at the speed of a race car, traveling at 300 kilometers per hour, with temperatures reaching 700 degrees Celsius. A wall of gray annihilation, swifter than a bird and faster than thought, it covered the distance from the crater to the city walls in under a minute. Those who remained had no opportunity even to feel fear. The wave slammed into the city with the force of a battering ram. It stripped away roof tiles, shattered sturdy oak doors, and surged into atriums and sleeping quarters. The air instantly transformed into a scorching furnace, incinerating lungs and causing bodily fluids to boil in a fraction of a second. Death arrived not through suffocation, but from instantaneous thermal shock. People's muscles contracted in a final spasm, permanently locking their bodies into unnatural postures. Arms raised in defense remained suspended mid-air. Legs bent for flight were frozen mid-stride. This devastating surge penetrated every corner. It located those who had huddled in deep cellars and overtook those fleeing towards the sea. It filled every crevice and extinguished every last breath. Pompeii did not vanish gradually, brick by brick. It was instantly submerged in a gray ocean. Once the intense heat subsided, an absolute silence descended. No screams, no weeping, no barking dogs, only the faint crackle of cooling stone. The damp ash began to solidify, forming a dense cocoon around the deceased. It preserved the folds of their garments and the expressions on their faces, so that eventually, as flesh decayed, a void would remain within the stone. A void in the shape of a human. By midday of the following day, the sun attempted to pierce through the gloom, but there was. Where a bustling market once thrived, and desolate gray wasteland now stretched. 6 meters of volcanic rock had swallowed the rooftops of homes. Pompeii was erased from existence, transformed into a subterranean sepulchre whose keys were lost for millennia. The city perished, only to achieve immortality. An entire civilization can vanish into oblivion with terrifying ease. History inevitably morphs into legend when there's no one left to recount it. Pompeii didn't merely perish, it faded from memory, as if its very existence had been nothing more than a vivid, fleeting hallucination for humanity. Survivors fled without a backward glance, dispersing among the populations of Naples and Cumae. Initially, they spoke of the darkened skies and falling stones, but the horror gradually diminished with time. These terrifying accounts evolved into family lore, and a couple of generations later into mere old wives' tales. Memory, in its mercy, erases pain, allowing life to persist. The city's name began to fade from scribes' scrolls until it was utterly lost within the dusty archives of a dying empire. Yet nature did not mourn. The ash that had extinguished all life proved incredibly fertile. Wild shrubs pushed through the pumice layer, their roots entwining around buried chimney flues and marble columns. Peasants returned to the slopes, cultivating grapevines and olive trees, oblivious that their plows passed mere meters above the roofs of opulent villas. They trod upon the heads of the deceased, harvested crops over the buried forum, and grazed goats where theatrical applause once echoed. Locals simply referred to this mound as the City Hill. No one remembered which city it was. The meaning had eroded, leaving behind only a vague geographical marker. Above ground, time flowed relentlessly. The mighty Rome fell. The Dark Ages commenced. Eras shifted. Cathedrals rose. New continents were discovered. The world on the surface seethed, suffered, and rewrote its history, while beneath, an absolute, echoing silence reigned. This was perfect oblivion. Buried under many meters of rock, Pompeii slumbered in a vacuum. The absence of air halted decomposition. Frescoes retained their vibrancy, metal resisted rust, and the inhabitants remained frozen in the very postures in which their end had found them. Within this subterranean realm, the year 79 AD was forever suspended. No Middle Ages, no Renaissance, just eternal August 24th, when the city became a tomb where forgetfulness proved a more effective preservative than any museum display. Pompeii had died, only to one day be resurrected, perfectly preserved. A shovel striking the earth should have produced a dull thud. Instead, a metallic clang against stone echoed. Thus, prosaically and by chance, a portal to the past was unveiled. The resurgence of a city, long relegated to myth, began not with a grand expedition, but with an engineer's misstep. In 1748, Roque Joaquin de Alcubierre was excavating a canal, hoping to locate water, but instead unearthed a vein of history. Walls adorned with frescoes emerged from the ground, their renowned red pigment glowing as if the artist had only just set down his brush. With every swing of the pickaxe, it became evident. This was no mere opulent villa, but an entire world sealed within a time capsule. When sunlight, for the first time in 17 centuries, illuminated the cobblestones, archaeologists stood awestruck before an astonishing tableau. The city hadn't been destroyed, it had been paused. This was not a ruin, but a theatrical scene abruptly halted. Charred bread on market stalls, intact eggs in baskets, dried wine sediment in amphorae. Everything suggested the inhabitants had only stepped out for a moment. Yet, the most chilling secret lay deeper. It wasn't until 1863 that Giuseppe Fiorelli, possessing a detective's intuition, noticed peculiar voids within the layers of petrified ash. Where others perceived mere holes, he discerned the imprints of vanished flesh. The bodies had long since decayed, but the volcanic material had preserved their perfect contours, effectively creating a death mask for an entire city. Fiorelli embarked on an experiment akin to a mystical rite. He poured liquid plaster into these unseen graves. As the solution solidified and archaeologists carefully removed the ash, shock gave way to reverent horror. Before them lay not skeletons, but sculptures of agony. The plaster, with unsettling precision, meticulously reconstructed every detail from their final moments. Taut muscles, the intricate lacing of sandals, the very folds of tunics as individuals, in sheer desperation, shielded their faces, striving for one last gasp of air. The void itself took on form, transforming anonymous victims back into recognizable human beings. We witnessed a man struggling to lift himself from the earth, a pair of lovers whose embrace remained unbroken even as the fiery deluge consumed them, and a slave who, tragically, never managed to cast off his shackles. These poignant figures emerged as the most authentic chronicles of human anguish, inscribed by the hand of nature itself. After millennia shrouded in obscurity, the denizens of Pompeii were given tangible form, ensuring their narrative would echo not as a faint murmur, but as an eternal, petrified cry. In this manner, a profound cycle was completed. Those who, above all else, yearned for survival and escape, ultimately attained something they never pursued: immortality. Yet this enduring legacy came at an unimaginably steep cost. Their unspoken pleas have pierced through the annals of time, conveying a singular message: treasure each fleeting instant, for even the most commonplace summer twilight could prove to be the final sight you behold in this existence.